Alrighty, welcome to this video. In this tutorial, we're going to talk about how to create this mail.php file and get it to work. There's kind of a lot to this, and there's going to be some theory behind this, so I'll do the best I can to explain it, but just follow along and you should be fine. So we have this. We created this in the last tutorial. Now, by the way, I'm in Firefox because we're going to need to be using FireFTP. And the reason is because PHP is a server-side language. In other words, it'll only work on a server that has PHP installed on it. All the free hosts that we have, all the paid hosts that exist, all of them should use PHP. If not, they should be ashamed of themselves and they should go home. Now, my point is when you're doing here and you're writing PHP and stuff, you can't just open the PHP in a browser and expect it to work. It won't work because when you open it in a browser, it's not being loaded on a server that has PHP installed on it. Now, if you want to do local PHP work, you can install this on your computer. It's called WAMP. It stands for Windows Apache MySQL PHP. So this will actually transform your computer into a server that has PHP installed on it, so you could test it locally. We don't need to do this because we have our hosts already, but this is something where if you're kind of like this guy and you're this crazy mad scientist and you want to do all this on your computer and not have to have a web host, then you can install this and use it. There's actually MAMP with an M, M-A-M-P, and that's for Mac. So Mac, Apache, MySQL, PHP, and yes, there is LAMP, which is Linux. But that's just, this is kind of cool because you can use this to make a home server. You could take your home computer and turn it into a server that you could use to, just like you're using your normal host. But that includes port forwarding, and there's a lot of different things you got to do to get that to work. But this is just an FYI. So, what we'll need to be doing is once we create my PHP file here, we'll have to upload it to the host and then go to it directly with the domain to be able to test it. If you don't know what the heck I'm talking about, don't worry, you will once we start doing it. So I have this. I'm going to hit File New, type something in, and I'm going to save it as mail.php. And I'm going to save it in my form folder. So now I have this PHP file. Now, really quick, PHP files can have HTML in it, but HTML files cannot have PHP in it. So, for example, this is kind of the opening PHP, I don't really want to call it a tag because it's not a tag, but opening PHP script, I guess, and then this is the closing one. So just like you have an opening HTML tag and a closing HTML tag, same thing. The PHP starts here and it ends there. So if I wanted to, I could take all of this HTML and I could throw it in here and run the mail.php on a server, put some PHP in here, and it would work fine. But I can't take PHP. I can't take PHP and come over to this HTML file, and then throw some PHP in here and expect it to work. It wouldn't work because this is an HTML file. HTML does not support PHP, but PHP does support HTML. So just be aware of that. So if you're going to have HTML and PHP coexist on one document, you can do it. Just make sure it has an extension of PHP. So before we start, here's this problem. So there's this thing called the mail function, the send mail function, PHP function, whatever you want to call it. So I'm going to hop over to W3 Schools and it'll show us what it is. So you got the opening PHP, you got the closing. So just throw this, let's just kind of throw this in Notepad++. So here's the issue. A lot of free servers, including ByteHost, don't support this. And what this is it's a function. So this mail function, what this does is it emails people something. So the way it works is you have mail and they have parentheses, and then in quotes you put who you're going to email. So if you wanted to email yourself, you would put your email right in here. And then my subject is just that. It's whatever's on the subject line, that little snippet that you read before you open the email. And then this is a variable called MSG that contains the actual message, which is up here. First line of text. This is kind of like a break tag in PHP, /n. /n is for new line. And then second line of text. So that would be, so if you read that out, it would look like that. It'd be first line of text, and then on the next line it would say second line of text, and you wouldn't see the /n. So what this does is it's going to email someone at example.com. So you'd want to put a real email in there. And then my subject would be, the subject would be my subject. And then the message, the actual email would say first line of text and then second line of text on the next line. And then there's word wraps, which we're not going to deal with. So if you want to test, if you're not sure if your server supports this, then all you got to do is just grab this code, throw it in mail.php, upload the HTML file and the PHP file. So I'd come over here, upload it, and then I'd run the HTML file, hit submit, and then when I hit submit, it would run mail.php. And then if you get the email, just make sure your email is right in there. If you get the email, then you know it works. I did this with the ByteHost servers, and they don't work. But it's okay because that made me go out and learn some more stuff, and we'll learn some cool things here. So just be aware of that. Now, what it's used is this thing called SMTP, which stands for Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. This is the protocol that sends emails. So if you want a server to be sending emails to people, you need to have an SMTP on there. And they're all configured differently. So what we're going to do is we're going to hijack Gmail's SMTP server. And don't worry, this isn't illegal. Google's totally cool with us doing this. And we're going to hijack Gmail's SMTP servers, and then we're going to use those to send the email for us. And what that does is it gives us, sometimes servers will put on limits. You can only send, 200 messages a day. This is going to make it so the limit should be higher. I don't know what the limit is, but also Google servers are up and running 24/7, and they're solid and they're fast. So we're going to be using something that will allow us to use Google's SMTP servers to send these emails. And so no matter what type of host you have, it'll work. And we're going to write the script that'll actually take all the information that people put in here and email it out. Okay, so that's what we're going to be doing. Now to do that, it's pretty involved. To be able to log into Google servers and use everything to send an email, it takes a ton of work. So we're going to use a script that's already been written. Now we still have to do some writing, but this is going to make a ridiculously hard task, just kind of hard, but not too bad. So we're going to Google PHP mailer. And I'm going to go to this one. This is the home page of it. It's this Worksware site. And then it gives us this little blurb of what it's about. Okay, it uses 9 million users. So, this is used like crazy. So it's a good thing knowing what this is and how to use it. So I'm going to click here on this GitHub link because this is where the official version of PHP mailer is. Now when you get here, you'll see the contributors and all this different stuff. If you scroll down, it gives you more information about what PHP is, this PHP mailer. If you come down even more, it'll actually give you an example of what it does. And we'll actually be using a lot of this, but we'll be tweaking it so it'll work with our forms. And then some other stuff that we don't really care about. So we scroll up at the top, we got clone or download. I'm going to click on that and I'm going to download the zip. And I'm going to download this to my form folder. So everything's in the same spot, and I'll hit save. So there it is. Now this is a zip file, we can't do anything with it, so I need to unzip it. So I'm going to double click, extract all files, and I'm just going to extract it inside of that form folder. It's going to extract a folder, so we don't have to worry about files being everywhere. Okay, so there it is. That's what it extracted. So I don't need that anymore. So I'm going to delete the zip file. And then we got PHP mailer master. So this is the master copy. When I double click into it, it just has a bunch of stuff. To be honest, the majority of these may not even be used, but we have these different classes. So we have a SMTP class, and these are just files that the PHP is going to call that we don't have to write. That's going to do a lot of the heavy lifting for us. This is why stuff like this is amazing, because they did all the hard stuff. They did all the difficult, crazy stuff that you would have to be a 20-year senior programmer to be able to do. And then they make it a little bit easier for us. All right, so this is all the files and such that you're going to need for this script to work. So I'm going to right-click this folder and just call it PHP mailer. It's just going to make my life a little bit easier. It'll be easier to call it in the code. Okay, so once we have PHP mailer there, once we've created mail.php, now we're going to start coding in the mail.php and tell it what we need it to do. So here we go. And yes, I do have a thing that I'm going off of. So if I sound a little weird, it's just because I am. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to set the default time zone. This script requires that SMTP servers, they want to know what the time zone is. And you can Google this code here in PHP and it'll give you all the different time zones and what you can say, but we're in Central Time Zone, which to say that, you say America/Chicago. And we're using single quotes here. Now in PHP, every line is separated with this semicolon. The semicolon just tells us, okay, we're going to another line, just kind of like how you do it in CSS as well. And by the way, speaking of CSS, this is what we did last video. We really don't need this anymore. So you can kind of get rid of it for now. We're going to be mainly in this mail.php. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is require. And what this does is it pulls in an external PHP file and runs it. So we're requiring that we're going to use this. And what we want to use is inside this PHP mailer. What we want to use is this, PHP mailer autoload.php. This is the file we're going to load that will run the script and do everything we want it to do. So we have to go, okay, where is that located? Where is this file located? Just like we've done with pictures, just like we've done with CSS, where is this located in relation to mail.php? Well, mail.php is here. We have to tell it to go into PHP mailer. So PHP mailer / oops. And then we want it to run this. So I'm just going to copy this whole thing just to make sure I don't mess it up. Okay, so we're loading that external PHP file, and this file is going to be what ends up calling all these different classes, and classes are just files of code that just do a bunch of different things. So my guess, and I'm not don't know exactly how this was written, but this is probably the group of code that talks with Google's SMTP servers. I know POP, that's the protocol that's used to receive emails and such. So yeah, there's just a bunch of different classes that do different things. This is kind of the main file that calls all of these and runs them as needed. Okay, so we pulled in that file that we needed. We're going to set up a message variable. Variables are just containers. So I'm going to store inside of message whatever I set it equal to. Let's see here. We won't do anything on this yet. We got to get that set up, which actually we should probably do right now. So we're going to have to hop back over to the HTML now that we got this message, because message is going to be, it's going to store the whole message. It's going to store the name. It's basically going to store everything we put in here. So everything we put in for a name, an email, phone number, all of that, all of this stuff is going to be stored inside a message. And then you can see with the send mail, yeah, we gotta throw that in there. You can see that right here, it sends it as a variable as well. And it just had it equal the whole message. This whole message was stored inside of this variable here. We're going to be doing something really similar. But in order to do that, we have to set up our HTML file so it can be called by the PHP. So that's not too bad. So the action, we say run mail.php, which we're creating right now. Now we got to give these names. PHP requires that you name these elements, name these input tags so you can call them in the code. So I'm going to say name equals, we'll call it NA for name. We're going to give the email a name as well. We'll call it EM for email. We'll give this a name, name equals PH for phone. And we're basically going to need to do the same thing with most of these here. We'll do that later, but we'll just kind of take it one step at a time. So name equals NA, name equals EM, name equals PH. So now we can come back here and we can say the message is going to be name. Now this is just going to, this here in gray is going to be just text that we see inside of the email. So it'll be name, and then we're going to use a period, and then I'll type something out and then I'll explain to you what's going on. So post, we're using post because the method is post. If the method was get, we would have get here. Okay, but we're using post. It's the more secure way to do it. And then we got NA. That should sound familiar. Okay, and then we're going to put in a BR tag. And then we will go down to the next line. And we'll say phone. Well, actually, what's the second one they fill out here? It's email. So we'll do email instead. Email underscore post. So we're grabbing the email, so it's EM. BR. Oops, we got to do a quote. BR. Then the next one was going to be phone. Period. Post. And what did we call the phone? It was PH. Period. BR. Period. Okay. So the stuff in gray is going to be the text that shows up. Okay, and then what this period does, this is called concatenation. If you've done any programming at all, you'll know what this means, but it just means it's going to add on to it. So I'm going to have name, colon, a space, and then whatever is stored inside of NA. Well, what was NA? NA was right here, this input. So this input box that asks for the full name, whatever I type in there, whatever I type in here, if I typed in Fred George, then when I run this code, it's going to grab whatever inside of NA with the method post. So NA is this input box right here. So if I hit submit, it's going to grab Fred George and it's going to save it. This will now become Fred George because it's using the method post and it's grabbing whatever inside of the element with the name of NA. So if I type in, my email, dkid@aii.edu, and I hit submit, well, then this would turn into Fred George, because whatever's stored inside of NA is Fred George. This, the post EM, will turn into dkid@aii.edu because I have a name right here of EM. So what's ever stored inside of the input box with the name of EM will be right here. And again, what this is doing is it's just adding it on. So it's name, space, then it's adding on whatever's stored inside of this post NA, which would be Fred George. And then it's going to add on to Fred George a BR, which is just a line break. And then it goes down to the next line. Email, space, whatever's stored inside of, it's going to add on, that's what the period does, add on whatever's stored inside of post EM. Well, what's EM? EM's right there, the email. So dkid@aii.edu. It's going to add dkid@aii.edu. Remember, variables are just that. Variables store something. And this is taking whatever's stored inside of the input element, which is right there. And then it's going to add onto that a break tag, and then phone, space, whatever's stored in the PH, whatever I type in here. So this would be all nines, 999, 999, 9999, and then it would add on a break tag, close it out, and then end it with the semicolon. So, again, it's saying post because we have a method of post right there. Okay, we will add on more to this in a minute, but I want to type all the rest of the mail, the PHP mailer stuff. And then later on, we can play with message to make sure it includes all of this stuff, the things we select here, all this stuff, and what we select here, what we type in here, all of that. All of that's going to be stored inside of message. And that's what we're doing here with the post. So post and get like this are just pulling whatever you put inside of these input boxes. Okay, next thing we're going to do is set up a variable called mail, and we're going to store an instance called PHP mailer. So this is basically invoking all of the code, all this code stuff in here. This is setting up a new instance, or I guess a new object called PHP mailer, which is just using, I'm not expecting you to understand this because people who didn't write this don't understand what's going on, because this is calling PHP mailer, which has to do with all these different code, with all these classes and stuff here. Okay. So what's going to be stored inside of this variable mail is all the different stuff the PHP mailer can do, and that's what we're going to define here. So we're going to use this variable mail, and we're going to go dash greater than is SMTP. So this is telling right here, again, this is just grabbing commands and stuff the PHP mailer has already written, but this is telling it to use SMTP protocol. Okay, the next thing we can set up is mail. Let's see here. SMTP debug equals 2. So they've built into PHP mailer the ability to debug, and you'll see that in a minute, which is really cool. And they have different states. So if you don't want debugging messages to show up, you just put 0. If you want just client messages that the browser receives, you're going to do 1. But if you want messages from the browser and from the server, you go 2. So it just kind of depends. I'm going to put it on 2 right now. Just that helps me debug any server issues and any browser issues. But once it starts working, this is something you'd want to turn off by putting a 0. But you'll see what this does here once we get that far. Okay, so now we're going to use that variable mail, and we're going to use, again, these are just commands that have already been written out with the PHP mailer script. Debug output is going to be HTML. So all the debugging information is going to be output onto an HTML page. Okay. Or it's more of like an HTML friendly output, so it's easier to read and to get an idea of what's going on. Okay, next thing, mail. So as you see, all this, when we did this new PHP mailer, all of these different commands are just kind of stored inside of this instance of PHP mailer. All this stuff's already been written out, which is just really nice. Okay, now we got to define the host. So this is the location of the SMTP server, which is smtp.google.com. We have to define the host of this SMTP server that's going to be sending the email for us. Okay. Next thing we got to define mail. Let's see, port 587. If you don't know what port numbers are, it's ports are predefined numbers where communication happens. So all the communication of this SMTP server from Google happens on port 587. Just think of it as like boat ports. You go to San Francisco or something, there's port 9, there's port 12. Well, certain communications, certain boats go to these different ports. It's the same thing. Port 587, well, that's been reserved for communication for SMTP servers. Port 80 is actually a really big port. That's where basically all the internet connection happens. HTTP communication happens on port 80. So if you go to a website, you're using port 80 to do that. So we're telling the port is going to be equal to 587, which is the port Google uses for their SMTP stuff. Okay, next thing we're going to define is the SMTP secure. So the type of security that's going to use, and it's TLS. To be 100% positive, I don't know what that stands for. Oh yeah, transport layer security. So this is the new brand of security from SSL. SSL used to be the secure way that stuff was transferred online, but TSL is the new version that kind of basically replaced it. So we're going to make sure that we use the most secure way, and that's the TLS. Okay, mail. Let's see here. What's the next one? SMTP auth. True. In other words, we're going to give authorization here, and that's what we're doing. So mail. Actually, I'm just going to copy this because we're typing that a million different times. Okay, username. So now we need to give it the username of the SMTP server that I'm going to be using. And it's davekidai@gmail.com. Does this have to be a Google account? Yes, it does, because we are using Google's servers for this. All right, so what's the password for that? This is just an account that I made up, and I don't care if anybody logs into it. So the password to that is AI Forever. So yes, you are going to have to put your actual Gmail email here, and then the password to that. For from what I understand, people aren't really going to be able to see this, but I could totally be lying. So you may want to do what I've done. If you don't want to use your actual account, go out and just make a dumb one just for this assignment. Last time I checked, I don't think, and we can test this when we get this far, but I don't think you can do like a view source and see the code. But I'm sure there's hacks out there that would let you do that. Okay, so the next one will be set from, and this is going to be who the email is from. Oh, it's not an equal. So set from, we'll say dave@thoseonekids.com. That's my email from my website. And then we'll say comma, and then we got to put in the name of that person, so Dave Kid. Now, this doesn't really work with Gmail because Google's kind of turned this off. So what this used to do is when you get the email, it would say it's from dave@thoseonekids.com, but Google's kind of turned off that functionality and not really letting people do that. So the workaround for that is this, add reply to. And what that does is when you hit reply, whatever email you type in here, this does work. And then I'll put in my name as well. So when I hit reply to the email that I get, it'll pre-populate dave@thoseonekids.com up there in the mailbox. Okay, next one is add address. Oops. So again, these are just functions and code that it's calling from all these different classes. It's just built-in stuff that it already recognizes. So this is the address that it gets sent to. So I want it to go to my Gmail. So when people fill this out and they hit submit, it will get sent to my Gmail account. You can have whatever email you want in here. And no, this isn't the subject. To be honest, I'm not sure where this goes from myself. I guess we'll see once we take a look and see if it works. Okay, and then we're going to do the subject. We will say PHP mailer test. Okay, and then this is the message that it's going to send. And we're going to have it send the variable message, which we're defining up here. So whatever's stored inside a message, it will be sent. This is the line that tells it to send the message. So I could, if I wanted to, I could just say, hi, and it would send an email that just says hi, but that doesn't make a lot of sense. We want it to be more complicated than that. We need it to actually pull all that information that people put inside of the form, so we got to do all that with the posts. Okay, now the last thing is we need an if statement that checks to see if the mail gets sent. So the question mark is basically not. So this is saying if the mail send, and that means kind of the opposite. So if the opposite of the mail being send, which is if the mail isn't sent, if it doesn't send, then echo, which is kind of a way to print something on the screen, echo mailer error. And then we're going to add on to that Remember the period was concatenation. We're concatenating up things up here. We're adding on to mailer error all of the built-in error info. So this is basically the debugger information. Okay, else, in other words, if it does send, echo message sent. Okay, that should be it. So we're going to play around with this message here in a minute, but we'll see if it works. Okay, now before we check this though, there's a few things that you need to do. And I can't remember exactly. Well, we'll see if I can maybe find it. But I'm going to say something like that. Dang it, I should have had this. Sorry, guys. Let's go here. I know it's somewhere in here. You can fire me later if you want. There we go. Set. I hope. Okay. Actually, I'm going to pause it while I go find it because you do need to have it. So I'll be back. Okay, found it. So you can just Google this. My client isn't accepting my username and password. Do something like that. Gmail. And this is what we want. So it's this page. And what you'll need to do is go into Google and make sure you're logged in with your account. So I'm logged in with this davekidai@gmail.com. I can click because this, okay, I kind of probably should explain what we're doing here. So Google by default doesn't like code like this, hijacking its SMTP stuff and sending emails without its permission. So by default, it's blocked it. So we have to go into our Google accounts and we have to say, Google, chill down, settle down, chill out. We're going to do this. Let us do this. And so there's two things you need to do to enable that. So, or if you don't, then this stuff won't work. Google will block it and we'll have issues. So what we're going to do is you have to log in with your Google account. Just go to google.com. And I think... No. Well, once you're logged in, is it privacy? No. Yeah, that's what we want to do. So once you're logged in, now this will take you there as well, the information here. But I can just go to google.com. Click on my little icon up here and then go to my account. And we're going to scroll down here and we want to do sign in security, pretty sure. We scroll all the way down and if this doesn't work, I'll show you how to get there. It's pretty easy. All right, where it says allow less secure apps, you want to turn this on. If you turn it off, it's going to consider this code that we're writing a less secure app, and it's going to block it. So you got to turn that on. And you'll probably get an email saying, hey, you turned that on. Are you sure you want to? And you're fine. You'll be good. The other thing on this page, and by the way, right here, yeah, it gives you a link to do that. You can click on that, and it'll take you in here. You click there on the less secure apps section and you just turn it on. But the other thing you'll need to do is unlock this display unlock CAPTCHA. So you're going to click on that, and it's going to say allow access to your Google account. You're going to hit continue, and then it'll say account access enabled. This CAPTCHA thing, from what I understand, is it just kind of makes it so it doesn't really use a CAPTCHA, so this type of code can go through and work. Now, when I tested this the first time, this took a couple minutes for all of this to kind of go through their systems and take effect. So if you do this and you're testing your emails and it's still not working, it's okay, give it a few seconds. So once you do those two things, you allow the less secure apps, and then you do the display unlock CAPTCHA, you should be on your way. And as you can see, you can get to both of those from this. All right, so once you've done that, your Google account that you're using here should work, and it should work without any problem. So I already have it set up a little bit. I have it to email me the name that they typed in, the email that they typed in, and the phone number that they typed in. So I'm just going to test it to see if it's working, and if it's not, we'll troubleshoot it and we'll figure it out. So remember, I can't just run the HTML file on Chrome. I can't just do it this way. It won't work. So if I go in there, do some stuff, check things, type it out, and hit find me, ooh, it does do that. Built-in browser stuff. Because I did this, remember the first one I have type equals email? Because I did that, the browser's smart enough to know that's not an email, so when I hit submit, it's like, put that in. That's pretty cool. Go browser smartness. So hit find me, and then, well, this is local, so it's not a huge deal. But it's just, it can't run the PHP, so it just shows it to me. It's like, well, can't do this, so here you go. So what we got to do is upload this stuff. So I got FireFTP. I'm going to hook up to my free host, ByteHost. And again, this is why I always say make sure it's all in one folder. All the stuff that I'm doing right here is all in one folder. So I'm going to go into my htdocs, and I'm going to click and drag form up there. And I'm just going to upload everything. The CSS files, the images, everything. Now, because we're uploading PHP mailer, you can see there's a ton of junk in here. All of these files, a bunch of docs that we don't need, well, maybe we need them, I doubt it though. Examples, there's just a bunch of stuff in here. So that's why it says 100 and something files, just because it's going. So while we're waiting, we'll come in here and we'll do a little bit more coding, because this does take a few seconds because it has to upload everything. So next thing we got to do is set the checkboxes up so we can pull information from them and grab the code. Now this gets a little bit harder because, well, you know what, maybe we should do these last. So that's okay. Yeah, let's do these last, just because this one gets a little bit crazy. And we're going to have to throw some code in there because checkboxes function a little differently. So actually what we'll do here next is we'll say, okay, what are we asking for with the radio button? What time? So I'll say time you'll arrive. You will arrive. And that's going to be giving us post BR. Okay, so now because it's a radio button and they're only going to select one, we can say we already have a name here, which is time. So that should work with no problem. So the name is time. Okay, and it's finished uploading, so let's just see if it works and then we'll move on. So there it is. We've uploaded everything inside a form. So let's get in there and see what we got. Now I just barely added something to mail.php, so I want to re-upload that. So here we go. So there's mail.php. I'm just going to click and drag it. It's going to say, do you want to overwrite it? I say yes. And I'll overwrite the HTML just in case I did something to that. Okay, so let's check it. Let's see if it's working. So mrkid.bytehost.com, we can go there. So I just put it inside a form, which is right there. And we want to load the HTML file. Now this doesn't work sometimes. I think it's because of this password thing that I have. I think it's conflicting with it. I don't know, something weird's going on there. One day I'll take a look. But it looks like how it should. I can right click and do view page source. So there's mail.php. If I click on it, I don't know what it's going to do, to be honest. It might actually be running it, which I don't want. So I'm just going to stop that. But I can view the source to kind of make sure that everything looks okay. And another good reason to do this is to make sure that, like, if I added something in these inputs, want to make sure that they're in there, just to make sure that I'm running the most updated version. Okay, so right now I have it set up to do the name, email, phone, and the time I'll arrive. So I'll select those. So name, I'll put in Dave Kidd. Email, we'll just do the same one. Phone number, and then what time, we'll say 7. Let's come over here and hit find me. Taking a while. This may or may not be good. Usually it shouldn't take this long. So just so we're not wasting a ton of time here, I'm going to pause it and see if the thing actually works. If not, I'll figure out why not, and we'll move on from there. Okay, I'm a horrible person. So this is what I got, and this is good because errors are good. It's saying failed to connect to server, connection timed out, connect failed. So it's telling me that the SMTP connect failed. So I went back and looked, and yeah, my SMTP server was wrong. It's not Google, it's Gmail. So yeah, my bad, people. So yeah, welcome to programming. So it's smtp.gmail.com. So now that I fixed that, all you can do is kind of re-upload your stuff, and we'll figure out if it works. So now I just click and drag over. It says, do you want to overwrite it? I hit yes. Hit overwrite. And now that my code hopefully is good, who knows? We'll see. We'll refresh it here. Okay, and so we'll type in a name, phone number, those 9s, and then we'll be there at 6. Okay, so when we looked at the PHP, remember we have, oops, that's not it, this is it. So we have mail, the debug, remember 0 is it turns it off, 1 gives us client stuff, 2 gives us basically everything. So this is what we're seeing right now, and it's showing us in the HTML friendly viewing format. So this is all the server, client, debugging stuff, all you care about is if you come down here to the bottom and if it says message sent, then woo, it should work. So now we're going to check. So I'm going to go to gmail.com. It's loading it. Okay, there it is, PHP mailer test. Remember I said, let's see here, subject, PHP mailer test. PHP mailer test. I click on it, and then it's telling me Dave Kidd. All right. Oh, okay. I know what we did wrong here. That's okay. We can fix it. But we know that it's working at least, which is good. So that means all this stuff is good. All we care about now is just getting the message tweaked the way it should be. All right. So let's do that. So, oh, by the way, and then if I hit reply, it says dave@thoseonekids.com because that's what I had right here. All right, so now we need to tweak this. So the reason why it says on here instead of 6 p.m. or whatever is because I didn't give it a value. So value equals, value needs to be what you want it to be. So 5 p.m. Value equals 6 p.m. So this value attribute is actually what PHP is going to use to grab what, well, let me show you what I'm talking about. So value equals 7 p.m. Because when I open this up, like when we code this, we have 5, 6, and 7 p.m. right next to it. But this is just text. It has nothing to do with the input tag. It has no idea that this radio box should actually be equal to 5 p.m. So that's what this value says, is if this radio button is selected, then the value for that radio button is 5 p.m. The value for that radio button is 6 p.m. The value for that, the third one, is 7 p.m. And we got to do the same thing with the checkboxes. So value equals Chuck E. Cheese. Value equals Chick-fil-A. Then value equals Golden Corral. Because same thing. We have the text here of Chuck E. Cheese, Chick-fil-A, and Golden Corral, but it doesn't know that if that is checked, that needs to be what it equals. So that's what this value is saying. So if this checkbox is checked, then the value of that checkbox is Chuck E. Cheese, and that's what it's going to be equal to. Okay, and then on the select, we got to give this a name. So name, we'll call it loc, just for location. And I think we got to do the same thing with this text area. So name equals, we'll just call it info because it's more info. And then that should be it. So basically everything you want to pull information out of with the PHP needs to have a name of some sort. And these that so the select it already knows that inside is the value of that. So you don't have to do anything there. At least you shouldn't. This doesn't need a value equals inside or anything like that. I may be eating my words here soon, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't. And then same with the text area, whatever's typed inside of the text area, it knows to grab. It's just these checkboxes and radio buttons. It just doesn't know that Golden Corral is this checkbox. So that's why we have to put the value in there. Okay, so now that I've done the values, I should be able to upload it. And this is where PHP stuff gets fun. You just have to upload, test, upload, test. That's just kind of how it goes. So I changed the HTML file, so I got to upload that, overwrite it. And you can usually tell because the new file will be a little bit bigger. So we'll overwrite. Oh, time's out. Yeah, that happens a lot too, the timing out. You just got to reconnect. Okay, form. We'll just upload both of those. and you usually want to hit overwrite all. So it won't ask you for each one. Okay, we're good, so we're going to refresh. Okay, and then probably what we want to do is view the source just to make sure that those values got in there. So values in there, the values in there, so we're good. So we do know that we are messing with the most up-to-date version. So we put in our information. We'll pick 7 this time. We'll hit find me, and it should be pretty quick. So message sent, that's good. We come over here, check it out. There it is. Okay, all right, 7 p.m. So it pulled it. It pulled it from the value. So we're good. All right, so now all we got to do is just start. I'm going to go back, get that ready, and now we're just going to start editing the PHP. So we pulled the radio. Now let's pull the select drop down, and let's pull the text area. Let's do those two, and then we'll leave the checkboxes to be at the end. All right, so we got that. Time you'll arrive, and then let's see, we'll say location, because that's what they're going to tell us. So same thing, underscore post. And what did we call it? We called it loc, right? Concatenate it there with another BR tag. Come down there, and then we'll call it more info, because that's what they're going to be telling us. Underscore post. I think we called it info. We'll find out in a minute. Concatenate it. Yeah, we'll throw in another BR, I guess, and then we'll close out the quote, and then we have the semicolon ending it all. I got to double check that. So select name equals loc, yep, and then text area name equals info, loc, info. Cool. Let's save it. Let's see if it works. So again, we got to upload it because we got to run it from the server that has PHP installed on it. Overwrite all. So once it's uploaded, come back here, refresh. So now we got all that filled out. We'll say 5 o'clock this time. This time we'll say in my car, please find me. Okay, let's see if it works. Message sent. There it is. 5 o'clock. In my car, please find me. Perfect. So that works great. Now, here comes the fun part. So the reason why these are easy is because there's only one answer. What you type in is the answer there. Whatever you pick here is the answer. Whatever you pick here is the answer. But this one can have multiple answers. So that's where things get a little crazy. So what we have to do is we have to give these values as well, which we did. And what we have to do is set up what's called an array. An array is kind of like a zip file in the fact that it holds a bunch of values inside of the array. So you can save a bunch of different values in one variable, and then you can go through all of those values one by one and pull out whatever you want. And so what we have to do, and this is getting into a little bit of coding here, is we have to do a loop. And what the loop does is it keeps running and running. The code keeps running until some sort of condition is met. And it's going to keep running, and it's going to run through all of the objects in the array, which is going to be which ones we checked. And then it's going to pull out the ones that are checked, and it's going to display them. So let's do that. So we got to do that up before we declare the message here, just to make sure that it can be stored correctly. All right, so what I'm going to do is set up a variable. We're asking where they're going to eat, so I'll call it eats. And I'm going to store nothing in it. Basically what I'm doing here is I'm declaring this as an empty variable. But I'm also saying it's going to be a string. In other words, I'm saying it's going to be text. So I could say it's equal to Fred, and then it would be equal to the word Fred, but we're not doing that. We're just basically declaring this as a string variable, something that's going to hold characters or text. Okay, now I'm going to set up that loop that I was talking about. So for each, in other words, we're going to go through each item in that array. And what are we going to be going through? We're going to be going through post eat. I don't think we've set that up yet. So we got to come in here to these input boxes and we got to give them names, just like we've done with all of these. So I'm going to say name equals eat. Name equals eat. Name equals eat. I did that because we're going through here. Now, one thing I need to add onto here are these brackets. And what that does is it tells the PHP that this is going to be an array. In other words, this is going to have multiple values stored inside of eat. If it was just eat, it'd be looking for one value, but it's not. It's going to have multiple values, so it's setting it up as an array, so it can hold Chuck E. Cheese and Chick-fil-A if I check both of those, or Chuck E. Cheese and Golden Corral if I check both of those, or just Chuck E. Cheese if I only check the one. But that's what we're doing here with this bracket, is we're saying eat's actually going to be an array that holds a bunch of different values that we can pick and choose from. So we're going through each value in the array, and the array is right here. It's grabbing the array from the form, just like we're doing here. And we gave it the name of eat, so that's what we're put there. Remember, name equals eat, name equals eat, name equals eat. Okay, and we're going through all of them as the variable eat2. And this is just a variable that we just created out of nowhere. Doesn't have anything saved in it yet. So each time we go through this loop, each time we loop through the items in the array, which is all the things that we checked. So this would have 3 items in the array: Chuck E. Cheese, Chick-fil-A, Golden Corral. This would have 2 things: Chuck E. Cheese, Chick-fil-A. This would have 1 thing: Chuck E. Cheese. It just depends on how many are checked. So every time it goes through the array, this is what we're going to do, whatever we type here. And what we're going to do is we're going to set the variable eats. Remember up here we declared it as this like empty variable that only had, that it's waiting to get text put in it. Each time we go through that, we're going to add on to, remember this is concatenation, so what this is saying is the first time we go through the loop, say this was equal to high. And the next time we went through, no, I guess the better example would be, first time we go through the loop, Chuck E. Cheese, okay, let's say this was it. So the first time it goes through the array, it's going to be equal to Chuck E. Cheese. But the next time we go through the array, it's going to be equal to Golden Corral, but because we have this period equals, it adds on to what it was before. So now it'll be Chuck E. Cheese and Golden Corral. If we only had an equal, what that would do is the first time it went through, it'd be equal to Chuck E. Cheese. And then the next time it went through, it would just replace it, and it would be equal to Golden Corral. But we don't want that. We want every time it goes through the loop, we want it to add on to itself. So that's what this period equals does. And we want it to be equal to eat2. Well, what's equal to? Well, for each, in other words, for each item in the array, loop through. It's going to loop through the array, which is all the different things that are checked, and it's looping through as eat2. So whatever the array equals the first time through, that's stored inside of eat2. Whatever it's equal to the second time through, that's stored in eat2. So we're basically saying eats is going to be equal to whatever eat2 is each time it goes through the array. If you don't really understand that, what's going on, talk to me, or but I've kind of done the best I can to explain it. But just do it one more time here. So it sets up this variable, sets it to basically an empty string. And then it says for each, in other words, for each item of the array that's checked, it's going to go through and it's going to loop. It loads the array right here. So right now this would load Chuck E. Cheese and Golden Corral into the array. There'd be 2 items in the array. And it's going to load those values and save them inside of eat2. So we got this variable here that we set up that's equal to the empty string. And once it goes through the array the first time, it's going to add on to itself. It's equal to eat2. Well, the first time it goes through the array, eat2 is equal to Chuck E. Cheese. So Chuck E. Cheese is stored inside of eats. Now I just added something. Then I'm going to concatenate this little vertical line there. And this will be used to separate them. So the first time it goes through the array, it's going to be equal to Chuck E. Cheese, and it's going to add on the vertical line to it, and then it goes through the next item of the array. Well, eat2 is now going to be equal to the second item in the array, which is Golden Corral. So eats is going to add that onto it. So eats is now Chuck E. Cheese, vertical sign, then Golden Corral, vertical sign. And because we have the period equals, it just keeps adding on to itself. Okay. So let's get that in here. So lab place to eat. I guess eat location. I don't know. We can call it whatever we want. Okay, now what am I going to show? Before, I was just showing whatever it pulled from the forms. So the name, the email, the phone. This works a little bit different. Well, what's the variable that holds everything they checked? Eats, right? Right here, eats is equal to whatever eat2 is equal to as it goes through the array. So we got to do eats. So we will throw in eats. Now, in case you didn't catch it, all the text is inside of these quotes, but all the variable stuff is not inside of quotes. If I were to put post inside of these quotes, it would treat it as text and not an actual variable. So you got to make sure that it's not doing that. So I have an opening quote. I got my text name, and remember that's right here. That's what's happening. I guess that's probably the best way to show it. So it has name colon, the post NA, which is what I put inside of that input box. So my name. And then I got the break tag, which shoots it down to the next line. Then I have email. And as you can see, HTML can be ran inside of these quotes, which is kind of cool. Then I have email, post EM, which is the email that I typed in, break tag. You can just see that the posts are not inside of quotes, but all the text in HTML are, whatever. They're inside of the quotes. Just be aware of that, because I can see a lot of people might mess up right here. Because if you don't close your quotes and put them in correctly, it's going to mess with you. So I could have email up here and it would still work, but I just put it down on the next line just for readability. Okay, so it goes through all that, puts in all the information, and then I have the break tag. I close out the quote, and then I close out the line with the semicolon. All right, so if I did my loop correctly, eats should be equal to all of the stuff that I check. So let's test that. If this works, we can scream hallelujah, and then we can be done with this wretchedly long video. Okay, let's hope this works. We'll refresh. Dave Kidd, put in the number. We'll say Chuck E. Cheese and Golden Corral. We'll say 6 o'clock. We will say parking lot. Help. And we'll hit find me. Message sent. Ooh, baby. Dave Kidd, email, phone number, 6 o'clock. Chuck E. Cheese, Golden Corral, parking lot, help. It worked. We're great. Everything's awesome. So remember, just explain this one more time and then we'll be done here. So we set up the variable called eats. We store empty string in it. We go through for each item that's been checked in the array. We grab the array. That's grabbing the whole array with all the things that have been checked, and we're going through it as eat2. So every item of the array is equal to eat2. So I checked Chuck E. Cheese, so eat2, the first time we go through this loop, is equal to Chuck E. Cheese. So eats, we're adding on to eats, Chuck E. Cheese, and then the vertical line. That's what that vertical line is right there. We go through the loop again. Eat2 is now equal to Golden Corral because that was the second thing that was checked. So eats now gets Chuck E. Cheese vertical line added on to it. So Golden Corral. So we get Golden Corral because that's Golden Corral the second time through. So eats, which is Chuck E. Cheese vertical line, is now going to get Golden Corral vertical line added onto it because of the period equals. Then there's no more items in the array, so it stops, and then it goes through and it compiles the message. And then all of the stuff that was checked is saved inside of eats. So right there, we tell it to print out whatever is stored inside of eats. So eat location, Chuck E. Cheese, Golden Corral. Holy cow, people, we did it. Any questions, let me know. But I'm glad to be done with this. Have a great day, guys. We'll talk to you later.